Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, The Healing Heart. I'm Calgan, you're you, and let's go through this together. And when I say together, today for me the pain level is sitting at around 2 out of 10. So it's that dull background pain, but that seems to be the default level at the moment. So when the pain level comes down to 2, I find that I can get through the day a bit easier. As always, I've got my trusty coconut water here and my red seedless grapes and blueberries, because it's very important for your body to have good fuel as you get through this period, okay? And in today's video, I want to talk about the endless movie that just goes on and on and on in your head especially when you've come away from a breakup, you've been rejected, the other person's decided they don't want to be with you anymore, and you're still in love with that person, you're very attached to that person, and so this movie starts in your head and you can't seem to turn it off. I've just sort of come from a lecture by a great psychotherapist. His name is Alan Robage, and I took some notes, and I'm going to credit him with the content in this video today. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about this obsessive movie that just goes on and on in your head. The obsession. It's just like you can't turn it off, and it sort of goes without saying that this movie that goes on and on is involuntary. It's not voluntary. Even if you want to stop it, you make efforts to stop it. Even while you're doing something, you could be driving your car, you could be doing the shopping, and it's just still there in the background, like a low-level tugging. It's like frustration, reminding you of your ex all the time. And it could be generic, or it could be a memory, or it could be their name. Gail, what's Gail doing? Where's Gail? And that's the brain just trying to stay connected to that person. And unfortunately, it basically causes constant anxiety, frustration, it gets exhausting. And it's the brain's life or death feeling to stay focused on that person. And we're going to talk about why that is. And again, it's exhausting. So for a lot of us, the mornings and the evenings seem to be the worst. Depends on your schedule, I guess. For me, because I work at nights at the moment, it's the mornings that are the worst for me. And the mornings used to be our time as well when I was in the marriage. And so, in the morning you wake up and you get this like 3 seconds or 5 seconds of clear thinking, 10 seconds, and then it kicks in and the brain goes straight there, the movie starts, and you won't turn it off. So, a lot of this is based again in attachment theory and our attachment style. And if you have had a attachment trauma or injury in your childhood and your upbringing and your sort of life experiences, it doesn't actually have to start in childhood. It also depends on your experiences as you go through your life. So with this trauma symptom, this trauma injury, it becomes preoccupied. It's called hyperarousal, where the brain goes into that hyper sort of arousal, hypervigilant state. And it becomes not about the loss or grief of the relationship, it's about the brain that's gone haywire and being stuck and looping and looping and looping. For some people it takes on a mild form, and it usually can be contained or dealt with, and usually goes away, in a reasonable space of time. But that's in a milder form. But for a lot of people, it can go on for months, and unfortunately I've also seen cases where it can go on for over a year or more. The good news is that with the proper treatment, you can reduce the symptoms, but yes, it can go on for quite a while. So if you've had an attachment trauma or an injury, when you sort of separating from someone that you're connected with, the trauma symptoms get activated. And like I said, this has to do with hyperarousal, hypersensitivity. And then if you mix that with what's called intrusion, the mind doesn't have the boundaries to the content, and that will just keep leaking in. So, you know, again, you're going Gail, Gail, or Bob, Bob, Bob. It just gets very intrusive, and it also becomes very weary. And your brain also forms these patterns where the neural pathways start to sort of just do it on its own. So you might wake up in the morning and your brain will automatically just go, oh, it's 8 o'clock, time to start the movie again, okay? So it's a normal response to basically an abnormal brain function, and that can make you feel a bit better to know that it's normal. It's not a normal brain function. It's been triggered by the event that you're going through or just been through, but it is a normal reaction to this abnormal brain function. So why the brain is looping and preoccupied with that other person is because that person is the most current image of represents love, validation, connection, warmth, and even if the relationship wasn't the best for you, and logically you can say, you know, well, that person wasn't very nice to me, or they weren't very very nice person overall, your brain has coded and linked to that person as the source of acceptance, validation, love, warmth, and it has this need, this desire to reconnect with that person because the brain is perceiving that you are being deprived and going without love. And this can be absolutely terrifying, okay? So if you have an attachment injury or trauma from your past, a form of being ignored or neglected, abandoned, abused or betrayed, then your brain knows what it's like to experience absence and to go without this connection, to go without this love, you know, to go without this nurturing, this warmth. So when we have a person who is the placeholder, who is the mind's image of potential to get love and to get connection, and that relationship ends, the mind, under the influence from the trauma, wound, or having a history of being abandoned or ignored or denied connection, the mind is going to use the current recent object or symbol as the source of that connection. And at this time, that's your ex-partner. This ongoing chatter in the mind, that broken record that you just can't turn off, the other, whatever it is. You know, what are they doing? How are they? I'm longing for her. I'm longing. Usually means that your mind is taking the image or the symbol of that person and it is linking it to the realization that you are going without love or connection. So like decoding symbols in dreams, because we usually dream in symbols, the imagery in the dream usually represents something else, even if that dream can be a bit weird, you know, like you're driving down the road and you look over and there's a cow driving the car, but you know, that usually is a symbol for something else that's existing in the subconscious. If you decode the dream, if you decode what this person represents, this person that you're focusing on, that reoccurring quality, is telling you, I don't have love, I don't have love, I don't have connection, I don't have connection, I don't have validation, I don't have acceptance, I don't have warmth, I don't have someone there for me, and it just goes on and on and on. It is tapping into a deeper fundamental place that is not satisfied or at peace with being alone in the world, with not at peace with being ignored in this world, with not having a consistent level of reliable warmth, affection, nourishment, connection, emotional attunement, and indeed love. But the mind is not being this direct with its language. So it summarizes all of this content into the image, into the symbol of that other person. And that is why the brain keeps getting, other, or the name, Jill, or oh, there's Jill again. Right, I'm not going to think about Jill. Ah, damn it, I just thought about her by not trying to think about it. I'm on the bus and I'm thinking about Jill, doing the shopping and thinking about Jill. Jill and I used to buy this type of cereal. And it just goes on and just wears you down. It gets so frustrating. And again, you try to distract yourself, you try to turn it off, and you might be able to do that with meditation for a little while, but it just goes on. So, but what's going on underneath all of this ruminating is our unsettled truth, our unresolved grief. And put that up there. This unresolved grief or trauma, that we do not have emotional connection and nourishment in our life. And if you have an attachment injury, there would have been times in your life or ways that have happened when you went without warmth and connection, attunement, harmony, and indeed love. And like I said, it can happen in your childhood depending on your upbringing. It can then go on into your teenage years and then into your sort of early adult years, depending on the relationships, experiences that you've had. And if it's being broken all the way along, then obviously it's going to be quite significant at this time in your life. And so from a psychological needs perspective, to realize that the placeholder, the symbol of the person that keeps coming up in your mind, represents and points towards the deeper feeling of what is going unmet. So we need to know this, right? This is important to know, so that we can begin to pull the projection off the symbol and realize that I need to focus more on my unmet needs and this attachment injury that's happened. I need to focus my grief on my history of not feeling consistent and reliable emotional connection and warmth. And hopefully this way you won't be stuck so much on Gail or John, because it's not really about them. So if I pull the projection off the symbol, I can then realize that this is tapping into a very profound grief of having a history and having a life of feeling disconnected, of feeling not belonging, and not having enough emotional nourishment and attunement. Even though this is still extremely painful to deal with, and the grief is profoundly difficult to work through because it's in your core, it's in your core system, it does give you this choice now. It does allow you to exhale and take a breath and perhaps have a moment where you wake up in the morning and you can say, this is not really about this other person. This is about how I have a history of not having meaningful relationships, or I do not have relationships with people who offer a level of emotional engagement that I need to feel nourished in this world, for me to feel validated in this world, for me to feel affirmed, to feel loved. So even though all of this content is still very painful, it is a way to help us take a break from getting sucked into thinking or believing that we're obsessing about the other person. We're actually obsessing about the feeling underneath that is too painful to touch. And it's floating in our subconscious and bubbling up in our conscious as the image, the symbol, or the placeholder, which is this other person. But because it's so relentless and it's every day and just goes on and on and on, and for some people, like I said, it can go on for months, and in some cases even over a year. And in some cases it can lead to suicide because it just gets so tiring. The intensity the trauma mind gets activated and you're looping and you're looping, and it is just so exhausting. So I do understand it's challenging work to pull this projection off the symbol of the other person as the placeholder, because sometimes you're just so incredibly tired, so exhausted from dealing with this, especially as it goes after a few weeks and even months. I mean, for me, it's through meditation, it's starting to subside a bit, but this for me has been going on for a couple of months now, and I'm just so over it, to be honest. I'm so worn down by it. So I understand, look, it's really challenging to pull this projection off the person as the placeholder, because sometimes you're just so tired, so exhausted, and it takes a wild amount of energy every day for the mind to continue to loop at this level of intensity. It takes a wild amount of energy. So you need to realize what we've discussed in this video. It's not really about the other person. It's just that they are the most current symbol, or they're the most current example of what you are feeling deep on a deeper level, and that is why the mind is using them as the projection for this deeper underlying emotional uh, emotional state not being nourished, and the attachment trauma or injury that you've probably suffered somewhere in your life, or more than once in your life. So start to use meditation, start to use things like thought stopping techniques, where the first step is you're aware that this is going on, you've watched this video now, you understand what it's tapping into, and you need to start retraining your brain. Because if you've spent any sort of a significant amount of time with that person, or even if it was a short-term relationship with a deep connection, your brain has already wired itself day to day dealing with that person, having that person in your life. And when they're no longer there, the brain finds it very difficult just to switch instantly. It takes time, and it has to build new neural pathways to get used to the new life without this person in it. Personally, for me, I've spoken a little bit about this in other videos, but I'm using meditation, especially in the morning when I wake up, because that's when it's the most brutal for me. I'm using sound healing. I'm using what I call the swiping technique, where images will come up and you can close your eyes and the images will come up and you swipe them past like this, sort of like when you're scrolling through photos on your phone. That sort of helps. All that sort of meditation helps, and hopefully over time, if you take better control of this, if you understand it now and you take control of it, it will hopefully ease up sooner than later, because I know it's maddening. It's so maddening. It drives you to the brink, and it just takes over your life. So hopefully this video helps. If this video helps even one person, I'm glad I put it up. Again, thanks to Alan Robage for the content. And if you like this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe down below. That will help get the content out there. I've got my email address below and some resources that I've come across that are very handy. And in the meantime, please take care of yourself, your heart, and your health. And make sure you keep up the red seedless grapes.